Welcome to the Epcotian Adventure,
a podcast where we'll talk about all things Disney, but we're Epcot-centered.
including tips and tricks, festivals and favorites, and the very latest in our rankings and reviews.
But we're still old enough to remember when the Monorail went to all of the Disney resorts. Yep, both of them.
This is episode 63, Getting Around the Walt Disney World Resort.
Or, I'm singing because I'm in the Skyliner and I love it and it's my favorite.
I love the Skyliner. So now please remain seated, keeping your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the podcast as we embark on our Epcotian adventure. Howdy folks, and welcome to episode 63 of the Epcotian Adventure. I'm Rod.
And I'm Sue.
And today we're going to be talking about how to get around the Walt Disney World Resort. So this is back to being a planning type of episode where we can kind of give you some hints and pointers on things that you need to know before you go to Disney World for the first time.
Or even not for the first time if you're just staying at a new resort and you don't know how to get around from there. This can also be useful for that. But we do like to throw these in once in a while and do some planning with you. We've been a number of times.
Well, I work there, so I've been hundreds of times.
It is different as a guest. It's different as a guest.
It's very different as a guest, yeah.
But yeah, we've been a lot. So we have lots of tips and tricks up our sleeves that we like to share once in a while in amongst all the fun episodes of doing rankings and whatnot. So...
Well, let's talk first about how you get to the Walt Disney World Resort. Well, obviously, if you have a car, you're going to drive there. So we're not going to go into the ifs and ands and whats. Just tell your data pad, as they say in Galaxy's Edge, as we just talked about in the last episode, to take you to Disney World, and it'll take you there. So let's say you flew into Orlando.
I think most people are going to do.
It does seem that most people from outside the area are going to come in by plane because it's so easy to fly into the Orlando area. There's 5 major airports really around within 60 miles of the resort. So let's talk about the Orlando International Airport, because that's the most common one folks are going to fly into. It's going to be best to either rent a car, or Mears is the number one way to get to the resorts by either bus, which used to be the
Magical
Express, yeah.
So if you used to go frequently, or had been in the past before the last 3 or 4 years, that would have been how you got there, was that Mears bus, the Disney's Magical Express.
You can now book that online or through a travel agent, and they can get you a paid bus now from Mears, from Orlando International Airport, straight to your Disney resort.
So same experience, just more expensive and less magical.
Right, exactly. It's still, in my opinion, if you're flying in, it's still probably one of the easiest ways to get to the resort, if you don't need a car.
Right.
You can also, Mears has taxis, and there are other taxi services and other car services available like there is from any airport. Do note, though, from Orlando to the resort can be between 45 and 60 minutes. You don't land at Disney World. You land in Orlando, and Disney World is not actually in Orlando.
So if you are landing on a morning flight and you're thinking, cool, we're going to spend all day at the parks, probably not true. So if you don't waste an entire day's park ticket on just a couple hours, there's plenty to do without wasting an entire park day's ticket on a half a day.
Assume that from the time you land to the time you enter a park, thinking that you're going to go to your resort and drop your things off first, figure at least 3 hours. That's a good number, as far as traffic can slow you down, as far as how you're getting there can slow you down. Even if you have a bus scheduled at a certain time, it may not leave exactly when you get there. So just note, give yourself at least a 3-hour window between the time you land and the time you figure you're going to be inside one of the resorts or inside one of the parks.
And we should note, too, while we're talking about if you're going to rent a car or take the Mears or the next one we're going to talk about, which is doing an Uber or a Lyft, which you're probably all familiar with. You just open a little app, you tell the stranger to come pick you up, which you're usually not supposed to do, but for some reason it's okay if it's through an app. I don't know.
Weird, yeah.
Verify that you're getting in that person's car. Be safe. But we should talk about a little bit why you would want a car over doing one of the other options. And really it just comes down to what else is planned in your trip. If you are going to Disney and you're only staying at Disney parks and you're only staying at Disney resorts, you don't need a car.
Yeah, you can pretty much do everything with Disney transportation.
Yes. And the rare time that you would want to go off if you wanted to go to dinner or brunch somewhere that wasn't within that Disney bubble where you can take Disney transportation, you could use an Uber or Lyft for that, which would probably be a lot cheaper, if that makes sense.
And if you want to get off property to do things like Walmart or Target, note that there is a Target now on property at Flamingo Crossings off of Western Way, so over towards the Coronado and Disney's Animal Kingdom side of the resort. But again, note that this resort is 40 plus square miles. It's the size of the San Francisco city limits. It's huge, or Manhattan Island. It's like, it's massive. Don't think you're going to walk anywhere, or bicycle anywhere, or roller skate anywhere. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to take an Uber or a Lyft or a taxi if you don't have a car to get to those places. Universal Studios, SeaWorld, Busch Gardens, Legoland. Nowhere near Disney World. So
right.
Those things as well, you'll either want to have a car or plan on an expensive Lyft or Uber trip.
So what do you do if you're staying off property in one of those hotels that's not at Disney World? In that case, that is where you might want to rent a car.
Just note that when you're staying off Disney property, that you will be paying daily parking rates at each of the theme parks. The nice thing is your $30 charge to park at one park will let you park hop and car hop literally between parks as well all day long. So if you pay to park at Magic Kingdom and you have a park hopper and you want to go to Epcot for the evening, you can drive over and you do not have to pay an additional $30.
You do have to hold on to your ticket though so that they know that you've paid.
Very true. But they staple it to a nice little card that you can put in your front dash, and then when you drive up to the next parking location, they will see that you have that and let you park. They do have preferred parking as well. That's between $50 and $55, depending on the day of the week or the season, really. And again, that will transfer between parks as well. Please note that if you're driving a large vehicle, so if you're in a big rig for some reason, or if you're in an RV even, or you're in a rental truck and you're driving cross country and go, hey, let's go to Disney World, they do charge you $35, and the parking is nowhere near the entrance of any of the parks. It's way out in the middle of nowhere, so just know.
We should also mention that if you are parking your own car, you can park at the water parks and at Disney Springs for free. But there is a caveat. Don't think that you can park at Disney Springs and be sneaky and take a bus over to the parks, parking for free and saving yourself $30. You can't.
Nope, there are no buses or transportation of any kind other than if you're paying for it, like the Uber or Lyft, that will get you from Disney Springs to one of the 4 theme parks.
Sad but true. And that was because people did figure out that loophole and overused that.
Yeah.
So suddenly that perk went away.
That's why we can't have nice things.
That's right.
So let's talk about if you're staying on property. So if you took a bus to your resort from the airport, or if you have your own car and parked at the resort. Parking is free, first of all, if you drove your own car. But if you're at the resort and need to get around the Walt Disney World Resort, there are many options, and it really depends on where you're staying. Some of the hotels on property have multiple ways of getting around the resort, and some are only going to be on the bus routes.
So we're going to sort of break this down by the types of transportation and how those relate to those hotels. So let's start by saying if you're staying on property, the buses are always an option. So if you are at any of the hotels and you want to go to any of the theme parks, you can always take a bus from your hotel to any of those theme parks.
And park to park, you can take the bus line also starting at 10:30 from park to park.
Yes, good to note. So that is always an option, whether we mention it going forward or not. So let's start with the monorail resorts, because those are the premium, deluxe, super, uber expensive hotels.
Kind of the original ones, too.
Which would be the Contemporary, the Polynesian, and the Grand Floridian.
Or the G-Flow, as we like to call it. Those 3 are on the monorail line and have direct access to the Magic Kingdom via monorail.
Which is pretty cool. And the monorail actually goes through the Contemporary Resort, which that will never get old to me.
I just love the sound of it coming through. We stayed there. That was the first place that Sue and I stayed when we went back in 1983. That old we are. And the sound of the monorail still coming in and then heading back out is just one of my favorite sounds of anything.
It's so good.
The monorail also has direct access to the Transportation and Ticket Center, the Ticket and Transportation Center. The TTC. There we go. I can never get those T's right. But that's where you would, if you had driven in and parked for the day, that would have been where you walked up to from the Walt Disney World Magic Kingdom parking lot to get a monorail or some transportation to Magic Kingdom. The key to this is there's a monorail there that goes from the TTC to Epcot. So if you're staying at one of the hotels on the monorail line, you can get off at the TTC and transfer to the Epcot monorail and take that into Epcot.
And you can also, if you are not in the mood to take the monorail, you can also take a boat directly to the Magic Kingdom, which is kind of a cool way to get over there.
It is really fun. Now note, the boats will shut down early. They're smaller boats than the bigger boats you see out there to handle guests from the parking lot. And if it does get windy out there, or looks like it's going to start to rain, those boats will shut down.
The other really cool perk of these monorail hotels from these three, you also are within walking distance to the Magic Kingdom. That's a pretty rare thing at Disney World, to be able to walk to one of the parks from your hotel. So being able to walk is pretty cool. It's a pretty short walk from the Contemporary, but
Maybe
you can
10
also
minutes,
walk from the Poly and the G-Flow, and they're both beautiful, beautiful walks. It's a great way to start your day before your feet are dead and you're wondering why you did that to yourself.
Because they are long walks from the Grand Flow, the G-Flow, the Grand Floridian, and the Poly. Just note that the monorail is your most efficient route if you're at one of those resorts.
But it's also nice at the end of the day, if you don't want to wait in that horrendous line to get back on the monorail, you can have a nice leisurely walk at the end of the day.
That is true. Grab some coffee and mosey back to your hotel.
Oh, doesn't that sound nice? That just sounds lovely.
It does, unless your feet hurt.
Well, yeah, there is that.
Yeah. You also do have bus transportation to Disney's Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom, Disney Springs, and the water parks from each of those hotels by bus.
So let's talk about the Skyliner resorts next.
These are some of my favorite, because I love the Skyliner.
Me too.
If you've been a Disney fan for years, you probably remember the Skyway that used to connect Fantasyland to Tomorrowland, and lament that it's gone. Well, Disney has come up, or not Disney, but a company that Disney has used has come up with a brand new version of a Skyway. Now, if you're out in Europe, that's a cableway or ropeway, but that's the same that you would go up a hill at a ski resort in Switzerland, for instance. These big, huge cable car cabins that will hold up to 10 people, including wheelchairs and strollers.
And that's direct access. You enter at ground level. There's not a ramp involved. You don't have to wait for a special one. You can just go right in. It's amazing.
That's a really good point. The buses have ramps that can come down. Note that if you have some kind of mobility device, though, that you can pretty much walk straight into a monorail or into a cabin on the Skyliner. So don't worry about having to make special arrangements for transportation if you're mobility impaired. Disney's already taken care of that.
I love that. But that also includes the boats, too. You don't have to step down into the boat. Don't think like Jungle Cruise or Pirates like that, where you step down. It is ground level, so you can just take your wheelchair directly right onto the boat. It's really, really well thought out.
So your Skyliner resorts are at one end, the Pop Century and the Art of Animation resorts, and those are both value resorts. Then the Caribbean Beach, which is a moderate. The Riviera, which is that's a high-end one. That's a DVC property, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it is. So that's a high-end one. And then that goes on over to Epcot. From Caribbean Beach, you can take a line that goes to Disney Hollywood Studios.
And the really cool thing about staying on one of these lines is you can also take them to each other, which doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but it's pretty darn cool. You can stay at Pop Century, which is a value resort. You could go have breakfast at the Riviera at Topolino's. You could get off the Skyliner, get back on the Skyliner, get off at Caribbean Beach, get your Joffreys, get back on the Skyliner, and head to Epcot.
That's a great point. The Caribbean Beach stop, you have to get off and transfer to a different line. There's a Joffrey's right there, and you can take your coffee onto the Skyliner.
Why more people don't do this, I don't know. But that's our tip from us to you. Take advantage of that Joffrey's cart because you have to get off anyway.
On the Epcot side of the Skyliner is the Epcot resorts. Now, those are going to be not really a Skyliner resort, but yet they do have access to the Skyliner. Most of those folks, though, are staying at a very high-end resort and probably have their own limousine that'll take them to different places. No, okay, not really.
If the people at the G-Flow didn't have that,
well, that's
these
a good
people
point.
don't either.
Right there, though, at the end of the Skyliner at Epcot is the International Gateway, so you can walk directly into Epcot from there. Right on the other side of that, however, is the Boardwalk Resort, the Yacht Club, the Beach Club, and Marriott's 3 properties, which is the Swan, the Dolphin, and the Swan Reserve. Those are all the Epcot resorts that have direct access into, by foot, Epcot and Hollywood Studios, by boat, Epcot and Hollywood Studios, and the Skyliner. To me, that seems like the most efficient way to stay, because you can get everywhere really quick, and of course, buses to the Magic Kingdom and Animal Kingdom.
So because they have all that convenient access to the parks, you are going to pay for that. So the prices do go up quite a bit when you're looking at those, especially like Boardwalk and Yacht and Beach. So just be careful of that, but know that you get what you pay for.
Here's a little travel tip. We've said this before. Part of the Epcot resorts are those 3 Marriott properties that I just mentioned, which are the Dolphin, the Swan, and the Swan Reserve. The prices at those 3 can sometimes be half of what it is at Boardwalk, Beach Club, or Yacht Club. So look into that, especially if you have Marriott Bonvoy points.
Even though they're not Disney resorts, like you were just saying, you still get the Disney perks.
That's true. If you're staying at a Disney premium resort, you will be able to stay longer at Magic Kingdom or Epcot certain nights of the week. And those 3 hotels that are owned by Marriott are included in that, even though they're lower priced.
It's a pretty great deal.
I love that.
And there's some fantastic restaurants there, too. So let's throw that in there
I'm just
at the same
say,
time.
Todd English's Blue Zoo has some of the best seafood you're going to find on property.
One of our favorite restaurants. So underrated.
So there's another kind of medium class, I guess you could call mid-class.
I like that, yeah.
They have bus and boat between locations. So those are kind of a specialized group. That'd be the Wilderness Lodge, where you can take a bus to all of the parks, but you can also take a boat to the Magic Kingdom, which I just think is cool.
It is so cool. That also includes the Fort Wilderness Campground as well. So we actually got to do this when we stayed there, when we stayed at the campground with our nieces, and it was so much fun. It's just something a little bit different, a little, it feels more special because you're not crowded onto that bus. You're out in the open air, and it's nice. It's a nice way to get to the park.
Saratoga Springs, Port Orleans Riverside, and Port Orleans French Quarter are all over and adjacent to Disney Springs. They have bus transportation to all of the parks, but they do have boat transportation direct to Disney Springs, which is really fun. I love getting on that boat and going through, especially after dark, through what is just a meandering waterway out in what feels like the Florida backcountry.
It's so
really
neat.
fun. Now, one thing to note is if you're staying at one of the closer to the water hotel rooms, though, at one of those resorts, you're liable to be hearing boat horns up until midnight. So just note that.
Especially if you're near one of the bridges, because they do have to blast those horns before they go through the little tunnel in the bridge. So just know that. And Disney Springs is open late. So keep that in mind as well.
A few of the Disney resorts have bus-only transportation. We like to just call these out. That's the All-Stars. Those are the 3 most common, I think, of the value resorts that you hear of or think of. Those are the ones all by themselves.
Well, and when you hear value resorts, these are the only ones that are truly value, that are that lower price point.
That is true. The All-Star and the Pop, now because they have those family suites, well, and All-Star Movie does now as well. But it still is a value resort. It's still the lowest cost that you're going to find.
Well, and the Pop Century and Art of Animation price went up because of that Skyliner access. So.
That's true. You could call those value plus, actually. At
yeah,
this point.
that's actually a good way to think of those.
Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge. Here's a premium price for a resort, and all they have is a bus, but that's because it's all the way out by Animal Kingdom, all by its lonesome out there. Beautiful resort. Also has DVC properties. So if you belong to the Disney Vacation Club, those resorts out there, just note they have buses only. Along with Old Key West, which is the original Disney Vacation Club resort, also only has bus transportation to the parks and to Disney Springs and to the other locations on property. The one that surprises me, and this is one of our favorites, you've heard us talk about it multiple times, Coronado Springs. Love this resort, but there's only a bus that takes you 2 different places. There's no monorail link. There's no Skyliner link. Moderate resort. Beautiful hotel. Really, really bad transportation choices.
Yeah, and some of these bigger hotels like that are bus only have multiple stops within the hotel. So you need to know which stop you're getting off at, and you need to know that by the time the bus gets to you, it may be full.
Yeah, that
on those early morning routes.
Happened to us at Riverside when we stayed there one time.
Yep.
So note that some of these locations have internal bus loops as well, like the Port Orleans Riverside, Coronado Springs, Old Key West, Caribbean Beach, Saratoga Springs, and the Fort Wilderness Campground. So not only do you only have bus transportation at some of these, you have to get on another bus just to get to your room sometimes because they're so big. Just be aware of that and do some research into the resort you're staying into, because some of the largest ones are not necessarily some of the cheapest ones.
And you may have quite a walk to get to a bus stop from your room, so make sure you know where your closest bus stop is, but also where the most convenient one is. Sometimes the first one is the one closest to the lobby. So, little tip here, if you're at one of the farther rooms with a farther bus stop, sometimes it's worth it to make that walk over to the lobby, grab your breakfast at the quick service, whatever you want to do, and get on that first bus stop so that you know that you have somewhere on that bus before it gets to the stop and it's full.
So this comes back to what we started with. Do you need a car at Walt Disney World? Well, if you're staying at one of these larger resorts, sometimes having a rental car is not such a bad thing, because staying there you can park for free at the Disney theme parks, and there is no charge to park at your own resort. Do note, though, if you want to resort hop with your car, you're not able to do that. Here's the best thing to do. Take a bus to Disney Springs, and then take a bus from Disney Springs back to another resort. Or use something like Lyft or Uber or Disney's minivans, which is part of Lyft, and you can book those on the Lyft app, to the other resorts. The reason we like to say this is because we've had times where we've had reservations, like at Topolino's, where we talked about a while back. The only reason we were able to park at the Riviera that day is because we had that guaranteed reservation that we could show the person at the front entrance. If you do not have a reservation for a restaurant and you're not staying at the resort, you cannot park at that resort. So park hopping is easy. You can take a bus or a monorail or Skyliner. Resort hopping's a little more difficult. So note if you want to head over to Trader Sam's and you want to drive over, they're going to tell you to park at the Magic Kingdom parking lot and then walk or take the monorail over to the resort. So be careful. If you're planning to meet friends or something and you don't have a reservation, you can't just drive in and park there. Now, here's one thing, too. A guaranteed reservation for a food location at that resort during peak season does not guarantee you a parking spot. So if
all day.
If you go into the Polynesian Village Resort and you show them a reservation for Kona Cafe, you might get told still to park at Magic Kingdom if it's during peak season. So this would be spring break, this would be Christmas, and some of the run weekends when everything at the resort is booked solid.
And some of summer as well, just summer in general.
True, very true. If it's busy at the resorts and they're full, they keep that parking solely for the resort guests. And they'll tell you to park at Disney Springs and take a bus, or they'll tell you to park at one of the theme parks and take alternate transportation. Just be aware of that.
Of course, they'll accommodate you if they can.
True. They also do frown on parking there all day.
But I'm going to throw in my 2 cents here and also say that if you are staying on Disney property, if you are only planning to go to Disney theme parks, you do not need to rent a car. That is my 2 cents. Disney will take care of getting you around. You may have to jump through a couple hoops and you may have to ask some questions on how to get from place to place, especially if you're going to different resorts or you're planning to go to Disney Springs. You may have to ask some questions on how to factor those in. It is worth it, I think, because if you are only staying on Disney property and you are only going to Disney resorts, you will probably find that your car will sit there for most of the week while you're there. So factor in your plans to see what works for you, but never be afraid to ask questions. Cast members are there to help you. They will let you know the fastest way that you can get from one place to another. Just know that fastest may mean it takes you an hour.
Or may mean that you need to call for a Lyft, Uber, or minivan. We've done that for reservations at different hotels before because it was going to be so early in the morning that minivans were going to be taken up. And bus transportation was not going to be reliable to get us to where we needed to go. So we just simply called Lyft. Somebody, usually a cast member before or after their shift, picks you up and takes you right over to the other resort. And yeah, it turns out to be one of the best ways to go.
Yeah, that really is a great tip because if you're trying to get to specifically a breakfast reservation at another of the hotels, you want to give yourself plenty of time to get there. And on those morning buses, they are so crowded because everyone's trying to get to their favorite theme park. So really consider using a Lyft or an Uber to get from place to place within the resorts at those specific hours.
One of the really nice things Disney's added recently at the bus stops at the resorts are monitors that will tell you when the next bus is about to arrive.
It's so nice.
It's a game changer because Sue and I have stayed on property at all over the place over the last 5 decades now. And
wow, take that back.
4 decades now. I'll say 4 decades. I think that's closer to reality.
You're making it worse.
Shut up! Keep rolling! You're making it worse!
I know.
Stop talking, stop talking, stop talking!
However, you did not know when the next bus was going to be there. They just said that they usually come every 20 minutes. We've waited an hour before for buses to show up. So now they have GPS on all the buses, and they have a central location that basically knows where the buses are. And it shows it on the monitors now, right there at the resort hotel's bus area.
It is so incredibly useful. Not only so that you don't have to wait for an hour for a bus, because you don't anymore. They know when one hasn't been by in a while and can send one out to you. But also, you know if you have time to take your little one into the bathroom, or you know if you have time to run over to the vending machine and grab some water. Like, you know when to expect them. It's like Rod said, it is a game changer having that access. It is so, so nice. So I think that pretty much covers how to get around from place to place. If you have a specific question that we did not cover and you need to know how to get from place to place, feel free to leave that for us in the comments. If you're currently on a bus and don't know where to be, ask a cast member
instead.
Ask
the bus driver. If you're at your resort, simply talk to the concierge at the front desk. That's what they're there for, and they, trust me, they know how to get from place to place. They're cast members.
They know everything, and they'll tell you with a smile.
Before we go, we'd like to give a big thank you to Riley Piper, Paul Trett, Joey Humphrey, and Evan Piper for their help and support. We'd like to give a big thank you to the transportation team at Walt Disney World Resort. Y'all do a fantastic job. Our theme music composer is Jason Patrick Rowan, whose music is licensed through Pond 5. And of course, thank you, Phoenicians.
Thank you, Phoenicians. And don't forget to rate, review, like, and subscribe. It really does help other people find us. You can find us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. The Epcotian Adventure is a $1,000 brunch production and a proud gold member of D23.
Thanks for joining us today for episode 63 of the Epcotian Adventure. I'm Rod.
And I'm Sue.
And we'll see you in line.
I don't know where I was going with that. Even though something probably very profound that now you don't get to hear.